You know, what if our oldest myths aren't just stories? What if they're actually sophisticated blueprints hiding scientific knowledge that was way, way ahead of its time? We're about to decode a legend about a demon whose power seems like it was ripped straight out of a modern genetics lab. And it all starts with a single drop of blood.
So this line comes from an ancient Sanskrit text, the Devi Mahatmya. It describes this demon, an asura named Raktabija, who was given this absolutely terrifying and seemingly unbeatable power. Every single time a drop of his blood hit the ground, it didn't just disappear, it instantly became a brand new, fully formed soldier.
You can probably already see what a total nightmare this was on the battlefield. I mean, think about it. Every single wound the gods inflicted, every attack that actually drew blood, it didn't weaken Raktabija at all. Nope, it just multiplied him. Their own weapons were basically creating reinforcements for him, spawning this whole legion of perfect clones right there in the middle of the fight.
The real horror here is in the math. This isn't just simple addition. It's this catastrophic exponential explosion. One warrior gets hit a few times, spills maybe 100 drops of blood. Well, now the gods are facing 101 warriors. Now imagine you wound all of them, and suddenly you're up against over 10,000. It's a biological chain reaction in its most terrifying form.
The scale just becomes, well, it's almost impossible to even wrap your head around. The ancient text describes the battlefield literally swarming with millions of these identical Raktabijas. A whole sea of perfect copies, all armed, all moving together. The gods weren't just fighting an army anymore. They were fighting a self-replicating biological crisis that was basically swallowing the world.
So, this brings us to a really critical question. Is this boon of his really magic, or is this ancient myth an incredibly precise metaphor for a scientific process we're only just now starting to really understand?
Okay, just look at this comparison for a second. On the left, you have the myth. On the right, you've got the basic principle of modern cloning. Now, the language is obviously different, but the core concept? It's identical, using a tiny biological sample from one person to create a perfect genetic duplicate. The parallel is just uncanny.
So the big scientific question is, how could a drop of blood even do that? Well, a drop of blood isn't just red stuff, right? It's filled with white blood cells, and every single one of those cells contains the host's complete DNA. The entire genetic blueprint you need to build a whole organism, from head to toe. But the myth takes it even a step further. The blood doesn't just hold the blueprint, it acts on it, instantly. This sounds an awful lot like what pluripotent stem cells do. They're the body's master cells that can become anything. Raktabija's blood basically acted like supercharged, hyper-accelerated stem cells, building bone, muscle, and organs the second they touched a growth medium, which, in this case, was the Earth itself.
And this crazy, chaotic multiplication on the battlefield, it's not just a fantasy element. It perfectly mirrors the same mathematical principles of biological replication that we see in the real world. It's the relentless, logical spread of a virus or the unchecked growth of cancer cells.
This chart really shows you that vicious feedback loop they were trapped in. A normal attack causes a wound, which triggers replication. Then, attacking the new clones just creates an even bigger explosion of growth. The very act of fighting the problem was making it worse and faster.
So, how do you defeat an enemy that is literally a living, breathing mathematical formula for replication? Well, the myth doesn't just give us this impossible problem. It also offers an incredibly elegant and, frankly, scientifically brilliant solution.
The goddess Kali enters the fight, but she doesn't use swords or arrows, not this time. In one dramatic, decisive move, she stretches her enormous tongue out across the entire battlefield and catches every single drop of Raktabija's blood before it can ever touch the ground.
Now, if we translate that epic, mythic action into the language of modern science, what Kali performed was essentially perfect biocontainment. She understood that the real threat wasn't the warrior himself, but his replicating genetic material.
And her strategy is just profoundly logical. First, she isolates the hazardous genetic material, the blood. Second, she interrupts its ability to make contact with the incubation medium it needs to grow, the Earth. And by doing that, she stops the entire replication process right at the source. It was literally the only possible way to win.
So, with the battle finally over, what are we left with? Is this just a fantastic story, or is there a much deeper message that's been encoded inside this myth of the blood seed demon?
When you really decode the mechanics of what's happening in the story,
It reads like a perfect metaphor for so many modern biological threats. Is Raktabija really an allegory for a viral pandemic, replicating with every new host it finds? Or is it a description of a cancerous tumor, spreading uncontrollably? Or maybe it's an ancient warning about the incredible power and potential dangers of genetic technology itself.
Whatever the original writers intended, the takeaway for us is just staggering. Buried inside this ancient epic is a framework that perfectly describes the principles of genetic blueprints, exponential biological growth, and the absolute critical importance of containment. It's a conceptual understanding that feels remarkably modern.
And that really just leaves us with one fascinating final thought. If this one story contains such a detailed blueprint of genetic replication, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other profound scientific truths are just waiting for us to find them, hidden in plain sight within our most ancient and enduring myths?